Good evening, everybody. So I thought I would take a minute to paint a Monstera leaf for those of you who are actually going to be attending this class live, as well as anybody who wants to kind of see how I'm going to do it and maybe you want to sign up. I do still have some spots available for my second chance, which I will, post somewhere where you guys will be able to find it. But I wanted to just share that with you real quick. So this is the original. I'm just going to kind of paint one of them for you guys so you can see it. I'm going to be painting on Arches cold press paper. It's like my favorite watercolor paper. It's got a little bit of a rough texture. I also do like the hot press, which is a smooth texture. One thing to note with the Arches, I always, for my classes, use 9x12 paper because I have 9x12 frames. Arches is not true 9x12. It's a little bit longer than 12, so I always have to trim a little bit off before I tape everything up and draw everything out. So just keep that in mind. Put that off to the side, and then I have just a random piece of paper just to practice on in case I need it. I'm using the Milang watercolors. That's what I use for my classes. My palette's a mess, ignore that. And then I'm also going to be using this metallic set. I have another set I'm probably going to use for class as well that has more like pastel colors, but this is what I have home, so I'm just going to use that. I've already pre-mixed over here. This is the lemon green, yellow green, I think, right here. And then this is lemon yellow. This is tree green. This is hooker's green, a deep hooker's green. I apologize. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of slide that back off. I do have a few brushes over here. I will off to the side. I'm not sure if I'll use all of them, but I have a 6-inch round, a 10-inch round, a 16-inch round, a rigger brush, or like a liner brush, and then I just have a 3-inch round. So these are the ones that I kind of use the most at home, so I just kind of have these off to the side. All right, so slide here. I just have a piece of paper with me so I can kind of test to make sure my colors are the strength or whatever that I want them to be. Paper towels, and then I also have it's like a flour sack towel off to the side. Lint-free towel, so I'm not always using paper towels. But, okay. So, to get started, I love to paint my florals super loose. So, even though this is a leaf and not a flower, I still consider it a floral. So, I like to do the wet on wet charging method, where you get the paper wet first, and then you go in with your paint that's already mixed with water, and you don't bring in a whole bunch of other water like on your brush or anything. So I'm gonna get my brush wet here. Wet on wet has to be done fairly quickly. It's that way you're wanting all the colors to kind of disperse together, so naturally, so that it gives kind of a softer, the way it dries, it makes it look a little bit softer. You don't have really harsh lines. I don't mind harsh lines sometimes, but for this, we're kind of going for more of a natural feel, I guess. So I will go in first. I will kind of zoom in a little bit here for you. I will go in, I'll do half the leaf to start with, and then I'll do the other half. That way, kind of make it a little easier. So I'm just going through, and usually I wouldn't have my pencil lines quite this dark either, but because I really want you guys to see what I'm doing, I decided to kind of make them a little bit darker. Once you paint watercolor over graphite, you cannot erase it, so that's just something to be mindful of. Usually I'll do a lighter line, unless I'm going to go back over it with a fine liner, and then I don't worry about it as much. But with this painting, I am not going to be doing that. So with cold press paper, it's a thirsty paper, as we say. So I go over it a couple of times, and you can see a sheen. You can see it in the camera here. That's how you know that you have enough water. Now you don't want it pooling, so you don't want just big puddles of water, but you want to see a nice sheen on the page. Okay? Then I'm gonna completely dry that brush off because I do not want a bunch of extra water. Okay, so I've already got this like lemon yellow, and no flower or leaf, it's just strictly one color really, and I thought it'd be nice to bring in some yellow. So dabbing off any extra water or anything. And then I'm going in, and I'm not gonna cover the entire leaf with this yellow. I'm just kind of putting the tip of my brush, and then I'm letting it just kind of do what it wants. With watercolor, you can't really tell it what to do, it's gonna tell you. Okay, I'm gonna rinse that out. I'm gonna dry my brush. Get a little bit more of that yellow green, and I'm going to bring that in. Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit more water and a little bit more paint mixed up over here. And you see how it's kind of bursting all by itself? That's what we're looking for. It just diffuses naturally, and it's really pretty when it does that. And so I'm just kind of painting that in. I'm not moving the paint around a ton. I'm not mushing it around. Just letting it do what it wants to do. I'm leaving some areas that don't have a lot of paint. Could be leaving a little bit of white spots, and that's okay too. I try to move kind of in the same direction. So down here I'll have a little bead. Down here I have a little bit, so I'll pick those up. Always adjusting, grabbing more paint, getting rid of dabbing off some water if I need to. Okay. There we go. And then while that's wet, I'm also going to go ahead and go in with a little bit of a darker color. I'm going to start with the tree green, I believe is what it's called. And this, you don't have to use this palette by any means. You can use any greens or yellows that you want to. I'm just showing this because this is the palette that I use for my in-person classes. So I stir that up. I'm just gonna dab off a lot of extra water, moisture. And then I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna put a little bit of that color. Just in kind of a few little spots. Again, I'm just kind of touching the tip of my brush and letting it diffuse naturally. I'm not really pushing that paint around too much. I want it to do what watercolor does. This is why I love watercolor. I love just to watch and see what it's going to do. It's embracing the chaos. Out my brush. I think I'm going to bring just a little bit more. With watercolor, it's a little bit of back and forth. You know, I'm like, oh, I want to bring out another color, a little bit more of that color, so I'll go back in and just let that just kind of drop it in, charge it in. Here that it's pulling a little bit on the edges, so I'm just gonna kind of push it a little bit towards the center, but I'm not messing too much with it. Okay. And then another fun thing to do, kind of why it's wet and it's a good way to get paint in without moving it around too much. I'm gonna move to my 10-inch. I could even probably go to the 6, but going with the 10, and I'm gonna pick the Hooker's green. Got a little bit mixed up over here. It's quite a bit darker, so I'm going to water it down a little bit. I don't want it to be super crazy. I may actually even mix a couple of those colors together. I mixed a little bit of the yellow green, the tree green, and the the hooker's green. You can take your brush, and I hold it kind of towards the end here, and you can just kind of tap gently right over. I don't mind if it gets off to the side because I'm going to be putting some in anyways. Rinse that out. Maybe tap in a little bit more of the tree green. Again, it's just a way to get some color in there without worrying about really disturbing what you've already put down. Maybe even put a little bit of yellow. Okay, rinse that out. I do still see a few little areas. I don't have my paper tape down either, so the paint can kind of pool up a little bit more because the paper buckles a little bit with the wet on wet. So usually I would have it taped down with artist tape, washi tape, anything like that. And if these little areas are a little too harsh, with a damp brush, you can just kind of go in and disperse them a little bit. But again, you really kind of want to just let things do what they're going to do. Okay, now I'm going to go back to that 16-inch, and I'm going to go ahead and get this side wet. We're just going to repeat the same steps, so I may actually end up speeding this part up, but for now, let me just kind of get it wet. And most of the greens that come in our palettes, watercolor palettes, aren't like a true nature colored green. So you can actually add a little bit of red, even a little bit of blue, but to kind of alter, if you add a little bit of red, it neutralizes it, so it makes it look a little bit more natural. But I kind of wanted to go for a little bit vibrant. It's not necessarily, this isn't really based in reality, even though it's a Monstera leaf, which is based in reality, but this is just a loose illustrative floral painting, and that's what I like to do when it comes to this type of subject matter. Get some more of that in there. And I'm really loading my brush up. So when I say to load it, like I'm literally getting paint on there. Some people like to just put the tip of the brush. You really want to get some paint on there. I'm just kind of touching the tip of my brush, charging that paint in, letting it diffuse naturally. I'm going to put in some of that tree green. Mix up a little bit more here. Oops. Kind of dabbing off any extra water. I'm just kind of going in. Sporadically. You kind of concentrate on some of the areas that you know would be kind of underneath a leaf, another leaf, like if they're overlapping. Maybe add a little more to the center. But I don't really overthink it, you know, I'm just kind of moving, getting some paint on the page. Rinse that out. Go to this little bit of a mixture where I added a little bit of that hooker's green. It's a little bit vibrant. I don't know that I really used too much of that in the original, but add a little bit of it. Just in a few little spots. Okay. We're also going to use that metallic color as well, so that'll change it up a bit too. All right, I'm going to switch to that 10-inch round. Pick up some of the yellow first. And again, you don't have to do this step. I just think it's fun. Well, I love splatter. Anybody who knows me knows I love splatter. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of knock some more of that in there. And then definitely put a little bit more of the green. once you paint it once, if you want it to be a little bit, because it will dry lighter, you can just do another layer of the same thing. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Since I am going to put metallics over this, I might not. I'll kind of see how it goes. I don't believe I did the first time, but. And then I'm going to take my 6-inch round, and I'm just going to use like a little bit of a mixture of a couple of the greens and then the lemon yellow, and just pop the paint in the stem here. And again, I start one direction and then I start pulling that paint down. You just want to go in one direction, and you don't want to keep going over the area that you've already put the paint. You don't really want to disturb it. So now I'm going to go in with a little bit of a darker color. I kind of dab the tip of my brush again just to get any little extra water. And I'm just going to add a little bit of a darker color kind of on one side and then underneath the leaves, because it would be a little bit darker. Got a little bit of water built up here, so I'm going to soak that up. You can just use the tip of your brush kind of like a sponge, and then it will soak up any, like I said, my paper's warping a little bit, it's buckling because I don't have it taped down, so it's kind of wanting to mush off the sides there, but that's okay. This is just kind of practice, just so I can show you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take a second and I'm going to dry this, and I will be right back. Okay, that is all dry now, so I'm going to go ahead, slide this over a little bit, and I'm going to bring in this metallic paint. One thing to remember with metallics is you really have to stir them up, or that like the metallic-y part kind of settles on the bottom. So I always make sure I use a lot of water and really get it nice and stirred up. So for this, you can see it kind of shimmering in the light, but I'm gonna take the yellow first. I'm gonna use yellow and I'm gonna use green, but I'm not gonna really think about it too much. Okay, I'm just gonna stir that up really good. And I'm using my 10-inch. I don't want to have, I still always kind of check to make sure that it's not super runny, but I'm just gonna go in and kind of bring some of that yellowy color in. Now, if you think it's too crazy vibrant, you can always add a little bit more water, put it on like a mixing palette. But I'm going to bring it in just a couple places with the yellow, just to kind of bring that yellow back in. I'm not really thinking about it too much. I just like working with metallic paints. You certainly don't even have to do the metallics. Rinse my brush out. And then I'm actually going to mix. This is kind of a bluey green, so I'm actually going to mix that along with just this little bit darker green. Maybe even put a little bit of that yellow. So it's always good to have a swatch piece of paper. I'm always using it to test my colors and even the consistency of my paint. So I'm going to dab off a little bit extra there. And then I'm going to go in fill in the rest of it. I don't always coat the whole thing in metallics after. Sometimes I'll just do like little portions of it, but this time for this painting I actually kind of painted over all of it. a little bit of water. Since we've already put paint down, you don't want to be too fussy. You don't want to go over it again and again and again and again, because then you just start kind of moving around the paint that we've already put down, and we don't really want to do that. Then you can add a little bit more yellow if you want. If you think it's too thick, like I said, you can water it down on a little palette. You can also wipe a little bit off with just a damp brush. Again, you have to be careful because you'll start disrupting the paint that you've already put down. I think that's pretty good. And then I'm also going to use those two colors to add some additional splatter. Sparkle, a little extra oomph. Actually, I'm going to stop that for 1 second. I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you all of it, but I am going to show you just a little bit of how I created this shadow line. I'm just going to show you a little bit so you can kind of get a heads up on that. I use Payne's Gray. I'm turning my paper, well, actually, yeah. Turning my paper upside down because it's important when you do any kind of shadows or anything where you are going to kind of butt up against something, you really want the tip of your brush to be towards, as I just stick my hand in that, towards the actual subject matter. So I've got a very, like a wash of that Payne's Gray, which just means I have more water than paint. I am looking at it to where the light source is coming from over here. So this side is where there would be kind of shadows. So even on the inside, I'm going in and I have just kind of a wash, like I said, and I'm just going to add that darker color. And if you get too much paint, you can rinse off your brush and go in and kind of remove some of it. Here too. Zoom in a little bit more so you can see. So I'm just literally putting the tip of my brush along that side and then just following the contour of the leaf. Kind of rinse my brush a little bit. And then with just a damp brush, I'm going to go right along that side, just barely touching the paint that I just put down, and it will soften that edge up. Okay, I'll show you that one more time here. Go in, a little bit up here, maybe here. And then if you want to soften it up, you just rinse your brush, just a little bit damp, and you just kind of run it right on the edge. You don't want a ton of water and you don't want any paint. You're just using just a little bit of a damp brush to soften it up. Okay. Zoom back out. Okay. And then I'm going to take those other greens that I kind of made. A little bit more splatter on here. Some people say splatter's overrated, and maybe it is sometimes, but I feel like that's my signature these days where I use it on so many things, and I'm okay with that. The larger the brush you use for splatter, the fatter the splatter will be, so keep that in mind as well. All right. I'll show you one other thing, like right here I kind of went outside the line just as another way for me to kind of show you how to make a correction if you need to. Get a damp brush, just damp, you don't want it super wet. And then you can do a scrubbing technique. So I'm just kind of going over that spot that I went way outside the lines. And then I'm just going to dab that off a little bit with a paper towel. If you catch it right away, it's easier to remove all of it, but you can lighten it up a little bit here. And same right here. I was kind of trying to work quickly, so I got a little bit messy. That's okay. So yeah, there's our Monstera. So like I said, there are still some spots available, and I will put that in the comment section if you would like to sign up. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Bye.